our children in so many more ways today, including by dangerous and lethal drugs like fentanyl. That's why I'm instructing Aaliyah to make combating this drug the top priority of our Alabama Drug Task Force. And tonight I'm also urging you, our legislators, to pass House Bill 1 so I can sign it into law as soon as possible. By doing this, we will put any traffickers of this deadly drugs behind bars and keep them there.
And I can't find a seconder usually when I propose this, but I don't care. I don't need a seconder. My own opinion is enough for me, and I claim the right to be defended against any consensus, any majority, anywhere, any place, any time. And anyone who disagrees with this can pick a number, get online, and kiss my ass.
No representation is made that the quality of legal services to be performed are greater than the legal services provided by other lawyers. I'm Harry Seal. You found the Backstory Podcast, number 146. Damn me, Ma. So, I'm joined today by my client and partner in crime, Francis Paul Rip. How are you today in Fairhope, Mr. Rip?
Very good. Can't wait to get out in the yard and do a little bit of yard work while the sun's out.
And Mr. Brandon Mosley, journalist up in Moody, Alabama, and reporter at Alabama News Today. What's going on up there in Moody?
We're just getting the start of this legislative session, starting to rock with the spring and the legislature. We've got presidential candidates visiting and trains going off the rails. Typical week in Alabama.
Typical. So Brandon, you were at the State of the State address, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
And you did a factual report of what you observed, and you were in no way part of the story. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, that would be accurate.
So are you familiar with gonzo journalism or gonzo reporting?
That's a little bit dated, but yeah, I am familiar with that school.
And it's basically you're part of the story, and you don't try to hide or you don't try to profess your objectivity. You report the story. You were part of the story, and therefore you're giving it to the public in a Hunter S. Thompson
I'm more of
kind
the old-fashioned who, what, where, why.
Right. Traditional journalism. And so anyway, we'll get around to this towards the end, but there's been some, the Twitter files, Matt Taibbi, while all this is going on here in Alabama, they're having congressional hearings, and they had some pretty good ones this week. And I just wanted to predicate it on, there's a big difference in what Paul and I do and what you do for a living. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And which is another reason we appreciate your participation in the podcast. So, Governor Ivey is the oldest currently serving governor in the United States at age 78. And I don't know if you saw the Ainsworth sitting behind her at the State of the State address, but he looked like a buzzard perched on a fence row.
He's been perched there a while.
So it was in the old House chamber. Is that the only time that museum piece is used is for joint sessions?
Yeah, it's pretty much for joint sessions or for the governor to have, some sort of press event. A lot of times bill signing ceremonies are in the historic House chambers.
Or Richard Shelby.
Yeah, we had Richard Shelby yesterday. I was at that too. That was a joint session of the legislature.
And they just basically had a how great their art hymnal singing in his honor.
Yeah, Kay Ivey said, we've had Lester Hill, Sparkman, Allen. Of all the senators Alabama's had, Richard Shelby's the greatest.
Wasn't Hal
Heflin sure brought home more bacon?
Wasn't Hal Heflin one of our senators?
Yeah, I don't know.
And State Supreme Court Justice.
Look at the transcript to see if he was on the list. I don't know that she slided him or I'm sliding him in recapping.
Well, I would say Heflin was more impactful on the people of Alabama because when he was Chief Justice, he merged law and equity in the Code of Alabama in 1975. So,
well, yeah, for attorneys, but
right.
again, we're just comparing senator versus senator in the Senate, and
don't forget the Clarence
Bill
Thomas
was there
hearing.
for 36 years.
He did us proud in that one too.
Well, like I said, he is the king of bacon, baby.
And look at our military bases. I mean, they're thriving.
And that came up several times in the honoring ceremony.
So back to the governor's State of the State address. The House Bill 1 that she's touting is a fentanyl trafficking act.
Yeah, by Representative Matt Simpson down from the end of y'all's way.
And he's also the head of ethics and whatever his house.
And he represents your section of the state on the Republican steering committee too.
So essentially, if you had pure fentanyl, a Copenhagen can full could kill everybody in the zip code, right? Or maybe more.
Pretty much.
And what is the limit on the law, Brandon? Is there a weight limit or anything?
Yes,
that's what they're addressing.
The statute sets limits. Where if I'm caught with the amount of marijuana for my personal use, that's like a misdemeanor. That's not that big a deal. Now, if I have 100 pounds or 1,000 pounds in my pickup truck, they kind of know I'm a trafficker. And so that's felony. That's a whole different legal game. The HB1 will go in and set trafficking standards for fentanyl as well as punishments. So those are going to be like major felonies.
And of course, fentanyl came up this week in congressional hearings over the debacle at the border.
Yeah.
So it's part of the Republican playbook. And like I said, it's whack-a-mole, man. They got rid of the pill mills. There are no more opioids, so people are turning to the next thing. And it's whack-a-mole. There'll be, someone will come up with another cheap drug. And the other thing
but with fentanyl, what sets it apart from everything that went before it is its potency.
Well, its potency.
It's both cheap and highly potent.
And the precursors are cheap. Thank you.
And the other thing, too, that's happening, and I know firsthand and have heard from people firsthand, is you have a loved one now that really needs pain medication. It is nothing like it was 3 or 4 years ago to go get pain meds. Now you can go through 2 weeks of appointments and evaluations and everything else for pain meds. So, some people saying the hell with that.
So the Attorney General can say he did something about opioids.
Yeah, we were, I don't know what we are now. At one point, I was covering the prescription drug problem in Alabama, and there were more prescriptions in Alabama for opioids, for prescription painkillers from doctors than there are people in Alabama. And again, I've only used the stuff like one time after a surgery. Most people don't, but the people that do, we're going to doctor after doctor. They're getting multiple, I have a back that hurts me and whatever. And, there were corrupt doctors, some of which have gone to prison under the federal laws, were operating pill mills where they were just writing prescriptions to drug dealers who, were out there selling Oxycontin on the streets. Mm-hmm. So what's happened at both the federal and the state level is we have cracked down on that, drug abuse problem to try to get rid of, the growing number of drug addicts in the state and in the country. The unintended side effect of that effort, which we've cleaned up the doctors a bunch. There's probably still more work that needs to be done there. But where you can't get Oxycontin from a drug dealer on the street easily now, getting it legally from your pharmacy is much harder. Fentanyl, thanks to the Mexican drug cartels and, Chinese factories that are making it by the ton, it's all over the place and it's cheap and it will reduce your pain. Now, if you get so many grams above, whatever the recommended dose is, it will kill you. I mean, you can mix fentanyl with just about anything and turn something like a candy into, a drug overdose situation.
No doubt. It's dangerous. And we've driven the population to it.
Well, now 107,000 Americans in the last 12 months, we've had records for, have died of drug overdoses. And Alabama was the 8th highest increase in overdose deaths.
That's double that of the Vietnam War.
Yeah. And we're talking
Wow.
12 months, not 7.
Wow. Right. Wow.
A lot of body bags.
Well, I know, but just think of those statistics. I mean, my God, like you said, that's 7 years. Whew.
So when you got all these kind of problems, guys, one of the two of the initiatives that the governor touted and asked the legislature to re-up is the Jobs Act and the Growing Alabama Act. And today we look ahead and create an economic development strategy for the 2030s. Right? So we need the Alabama Jobs Act and the Grow Alabama Act. You know what those are, Paul?
I do not.
Those are tax incentives for people to move their company here.
Okay.
Tax
Or for
credits.
their company to expand here or remain here.
It's corporate welfare.
Yeah, it'd be nice to get paid to stay.
Wouldn't it?
That's pretty good.
So I'm also proposing we invest even more in our locally owned businesses, the one ingrained into the DNA of our community, through over a $200 million grant program known as Main Street Program. These competitive grants will help revitalize our small towns and cities. When folks think of Main Street, they should think of rural Alabama. Okay, so guess where all the main streets are?
Where?
Man, they all look kind of north of Montgomery to me. The only one in Baldwin County is Foley. The only one in Escambia County is Atmore. And the only one in Monroe County is Monroeville. Then you get on over to Enterprise and Dothan, Headland, Elba, Eufaula, Demopolis. And also in this, she called for the creation of a new magnet school in Demopolis.
Yeah, for healthcare worker
Right.
training.
Anyway, I don't know who's representing Demopolis, but they sure are getting theirs. Maybe we ought to run that person for Senate. So ARPA special session, that was a surprise to me. Did you know that was coming? That she was going to call a special session? You did know.
Yeah, that had been rumored for weeks.
So and this is CARES Act, right? Or is it ARPA?
No, it's ARPA.
It's ARPA.
This
Okay.
is, the CARES Act was the COVID relief plan passed under President Trump. And then as soon as President Biden got inaugurated and sworn in, he needed his own, giant government giveaway to help us recover.
1.9 trillion.
COVID.
And
that's ARPA.
Okay, so if the CARES Act was to reimburse the hospital, why is there $339 million for healthcare costs, including $100 million to reimburse hospitals for pandemic-related expenses, $100 million to reimburse nursing homes, $25 million to support mental health programs and services? Now, I'm not throwing rocks at $25 million for that, but then there's $400 million for water and sewer infrastructure projects. 260. Oh, and by the way, I don't know what you do when you're the fastest growing county in the state of Alabama and you get not one nickel of this money, but we need to rethink our leadership if we can't do any better than that.
That has been the story since 2010.
Yeah,
Same story.
Okay, so back to violation of Section 93, 94, and 95 of the Constitution of 1901, $260 million is going to go in the pockets of cable companies and AT&T and all these guys to run broadband to rural areas in Alabama. I'm sure Demopolis is going to get theirs. And then $55 million for projects to address economic impacts of the pandemic. And according to one of your reporters there, they are making headway. The other thing that I thought that you would find shocking, Paul, is that the governor is now urging lawmakers to require students to start at kindergarten instead of first grade. I mean, we're just going to, from the time they come out of the womb until they enter the workforce, the state is responsible for all these children.
I wonder how many states do that. Do you know, Brandon?
That I don't know. But, when we grew up, there were 10 years you had to go, basically you could leave at 16, but you had to go through grades 1st through 8th. And then basically, unless you were stupid, had to repeat, some grades, 2 years of high school. And then we tried to talk you into finishing those 2 years. Then we added kindergarten, and now the governor wants to make kindergarten mandatory, and we're throwing a lot of money at pre-K for 4-year-olds.
Which is basically daycare so parents can go to work. We could call it education, but it's basically daycare. And this is the picture I was talking about, Paul, where he's perched like a buzzard. And at one point, she had like a real bad cough, and he leaned forward as if hoping she would fall over dead.
Oh, come on, man. God.
So the other thing that the governor did recently is respond. Alabama Cabinet on Thursday ordered state agencies to follow new procedures for responding to public records requests. Changes intend to provide structure in the state with one of the weakest open record laws in the country.
We know how hard it is to get records, don't we, Harry?
Well, you can't even get a coroner's report without a subpoena, according to our coroner. And you can't get court records for a guy that's been in prison since 2005 from Aaliyah. They'll just send you a copy of Lanyap versus Mack, where they say it's investigatory privilege. You can't get that. It's crazy. Crazy.
It is crazy.
We live in a state with a law like that.
As a reporter, the way it's been for the last several years, we have open records acts on the books. But, if you go to a local government and you want these files and these contracts or whatever your investigator, just someone said something about, there are city clerks and city governments that will drop everything and they will go and print up what you want and then charge you something per copy.
$1.25.
There are others that, hey, sue us. And that's policy. And, if you're a big time company that can, has in-house attorneys, you could theoretically sue. And then, when you go to court, generally the city attorney will show up with the records that you originally wanted in a box and drop no matter. But more smaller outfits like what I've worked for, spending 25 or 30,000 or more on attorneys to make enforce a public records act deal is an awfully high burden.
It's prohibitive. It's designed to be prohibitive, Brandon. So you can't ask for it or fight it. You don't have the resources.
I will say on a positive note, though, I've dealt with Fairhope for 15 years, and the city clerk there, Lisa Hanks, has always been straight up with me.
Oh, exactly.
Now, I have gone to other municipalities and police forces, like you're saying, Brandon, and just have the door slammed. No, you're not getting anything.
Yeah, I mean, it varies basically from city clerk to city clerk and city attorney to city attorney.
Yeah.
And it's the culture of the organization that dictates whether or not they disclose the information, and we'll get to a little bit of that here in a minute. So, spending, school choice among key session issues. When will this special session be over, Brandon, and when will they be in regular session?
Next week we're going to finish up the special session. Then Tuesday after next, I'm thinking that's like March 21st, we begin the regular session all over again. We had one day, and that was the state of the state. Then the governor called the special, which meant the legislature had to drop everything and focus on the special session. Then we can get back to House Bill 1 and all of our regular business in the regular session.
I got you. So, the school choice and spending, have you seen any proposed legislation on that? Would it be a voucher program where you could,
I have not seen the school choice bill yet. Now, okay. I know that there is some of the school choice advocates are advocating a much broader, more voucher type bill. But my understanding is what the leadership is getting behind is going to be a more limited to increasing the charter schools commission and allowing more charter schools, public charters to be set up.
Yeah, and somebody's going to have to explain to me the logic in that. But another thing that happened.
Well, we have some of the worst school systems in the state.
Yep.
The country,
and apparently some of the worst maintained rail in the country. Norfolk Southern had a train derailment the morning that their CEO was to appear in front of Congress about the East Palestine, Ohio spill. The damn train derails at 7 a.m. in Alabama.
Yeah, so, I was in Montgomery covering the legislature, and then that broke, and it was like.
Well, there wasn't an explosion. It wasn't carrying light, sweet crude and chemical waste.
We need to thank God, because there's no telling what runs up and down that track.
There is no telling.
When it derailed, fortunately, it was not carrying anything that was dangerous that we're aware of.
Well, it just looks like a bunch of scrap metal in that one container right there. But, of course, I'm sure that this train's probably miles long.
Yeah, you know what's on a freight train now. If you ever stop at a crossing for one, it's not like it used to be when it was like 25 cars.
Is that a cattle car up that way? That crooked ass sticking up in there? I don't think those cows survived that. Might have been some livestock loss in this one too. All right, so I want to talk about something, and we're going to predicate it with a video. And if y'all give me a second, I'll get that queued up.
Tonight, the Baldwin County Major Crimes Unit is investigating a deadly officer-involved shooting to determine if the officer's actions were justifiable.
A Bay Minette police officer shot and killed Otis French Jr. Saturday after a traffic stop on Lower Street. Investigators say the two tussled, and French took the officer's taser and shocked him at length. The officer then opened fire. NBC 15's Andrea Ramey joins us now.
Andrea, that officer now on paid administrative leave.
He's being described as a veteran officer who has worked in Baldwin County for more than a decade. Ultimately, a Baldwin County grand jury will review this case and determine if his actions on Saturday were appropriate.
Lieutenant Andre Reed, commander for the Baldwin County Major Crimes Unit, says the officer who shot and killed Otis French Jr. was wearing a body camera, which recorded the shooting and the events leading up to it. Reed says French pushed the officer down during an initial fight outside French's car after a traffic stop for a non-working rear blinker.
Mr. French actually fled for a little bit. They re-engaged, got into another fight.
Reed says the officer attempted to tase French, but it was, quote, ineffective, and French wrestled the taser away from the officer and tased him.
The taser was engaged by Mr. French for a lengthy period. Tasers that they're issued to the Bay Minette Police Department anyway work both with a cartridge and without. So he was able to continue to use that taser.
Reed says the body cam footage will not be released at this time. How many shots were fired, how many times French was shot, and where is still being investigated, Reed says. The officer's name is also not being released.
Officer-involved shootings have a lot of implications, not just for the agency, that particular officer. Obviously, the victim in this case, the shooting victim, their family is currently grieving. But I would say for our community overall. And so We do our best to try to, I won't say protect everyone, but respect everyone's privacy as this investigation takes place.
Coming up tonight at 6 o'clock, what court documents reveal about previous run-ins French had with police. Reporting live tonight in Baldwin County, Andrea Ramey, NBC 15 News.
Yeah, that was 6 months ago, Paul.
Right. Nothing since then except your new little letter there.
There's a letter from the mayor to Otis French's family, and this was reported March 8th. Yep. And this letter is dated February 23rd to Ms. Tamara French. Dear Ms. French, this letter is provided in response to your recent request. At no point in time has the city directed or controlled the investigation. Isn't that interesting, Mr. Ripp?
Yes.
Okay. The city has repeatedly communicated that this matter was immediately submitted to the Baldwin County Major Crimes Unit for independent investigation. The problem is that Chief Al Tolbert is the chairman of the Major Crimes Unit Board of Directors.
And Police Chief of Bay Minette.
We are unable to confirm that the city has been informed that the MCU submitted this matter to. We are able to confirm that the city has been informed by the Major Crimes Unit, has submitted this matter to the Office of the Attorney General for the State of Alabama for review. The city's preference is for this matter to be concluded in its entirety as soon as possible. However, we are not in control of the process and, like you, must wait until it is complete, which we hope will be soon. During the pendency of this investigation, the involved officer continues to be employed at the Bay Minette Police Department. While we will not comment on the internal operation matters or specific officer assignments, the city can confirm that the officer is currently not performing any patrol duties in the city. The city prefers to remain courteous and respectful. However, the allegations of a cover-up and other allegations are without merit, and again, we do not control the investigation or the speed with which it is conducted. Sincerely, Robert A. Bob Wills, Mayor.
The letter itself should make you suspicious of a cover-up. Just the letter itself. And if you want reasoning, we've been over this before. This goes to major crimes. Major crimes, we know, are made up of different municipal police chiefs in the Baldwin County. Al Tolbert is on there. His officer is the one that killed Mr. French. How he could be on that, I don't know. One thing that they are saying that I think the people in Bay Minette should take note of is that this is being sent to the to the Attorney General. And the Attorney General, my advice would be everybody that wants to write a letter, a note, an email, or anything, contact the Attorney General and say that you want this investigated by the FBI, because it needs to get out of the hands of Alabama to have any credibility. Now, as far as being suspicious, we also know that the grand juries are secret. And we know of a case where someone made a statement as simple as, "This gun is the murder weapon." We now know that statement is false, and a man's been in jail 18 years. 18 years he's been in jail for one sentence that was spoken that they later admitted in the grand jury. Also, the other conflict of interest, huge conflict of interest, is in the grand jury process, the major crimes is going to go to the district attorney. The district attorney and the major crimes are connected at the hip. The district attorney, Mr. Wilters, and Hoss Mack and Mr. Wills, the mayor of Bay Minette, they all go back 30 years. Nothing will happen as far as any accountability. Nothing has ever happened as far as any accountability goes that way. Now, we've also had, remember, the Yates case, the Jonathan Victor case, the 5 people that were killed going the wrong way on the highway. Now Mr. French And then we have the Peyton Little incident, strangulation by his seatbelt. And I got word on the street that somebody's looking into that, Harry. So we'll see what's happening. But anyway, I would be highly, highly suspicious of it being covered up. And there's every indication that it would be. There's been complaints against Mr. Wills with the Ethics Commission, but yet we look at the Ethics Commission director, who is the one that has said Mr. Wills' actions are okay, but now the Ethics Director has 3 lawsuits, one including the Attorney General. So it is time for the people in Bay Minette to go directly to the Attorney General of Alabama and demand that there be an investigation that we can see. Let's look at the video that we paid $600,000 taxpayer money for these video cameras, and we never get to see any video unless it's chopped up or censored. So before I get on a rant, yes, there's every reason in the world to be suspicious of Mr. Wills, the major crimes, and the whole protocol of investigating this sort of crime. And my forecast is that you got the 3rd major lawsuit coming your way over Mr. French.
Well, let me tell you what I see. I see a mayor who doesn't know how to handle public pressure.
Absolutely.
Because since this first protest at the courthouse, these people have come and silently protested at every single city council meeting, and they follow him out to his car.
They should.
Yeah. Absolutely.
They should. And they should contact every single representative they can to get on board with this being investigated the right way, or it's just going to continue to happen again and again and again.
So September 7th, 2022, Scott Johnson wrote one of the best articles I've ever read in my life. It should be required reading to graduate from high school. Everyone should have to read What's the Narrative? Details released by law enforcement can drive perception. You heard what they said, previous run-ins with the law. Where are they going to get that information from? Well, from the major crimes unit.
The first thing is either, pardon the pun, shoot the messenger. That's the first thing is let's say any blame and all that we can put on them. But what should be remembered here is that Mr. French's family, Senior, they have been publicly trying to work with Mayor Wills for at least a year prior to this incident about the black community being harassed by the police department.
And then his son's the one that gets killed.
Yeah. I mean, my God, you can't make that up.
Well,
I think he's shown considerable restraint and a total gentleman over this whole thing. I don't know that I would be so quiet, to tell you the truth.
And every time Mayor Wills makes the news, we're going to remind you about the bungalows that the utility board that he sits on purchased from his family trust.
And Mayor Wills is also the landlord for the Baldwin County Legislative Delegation. I mean, wrap that around your head.
Only the Land Yap and Backstory podcast could make an issue out of someone leasing a building. Where that's
and
the
it's
famous
not an
last words
issue.
of Chris
It
Elliott.
is a conflict of interest. It is a direct conflict of interest.
I agree.
But you can't appeal to the bar and you can't appeal to the Ethics Commission because both of those are not credible anymore.
Then you got, we heard from Lieutenant Andre Reed. He is the Baldwin County Major Crimes Unit Commander, right? And of course,
he's under Hossmack and does what he's told.
And
right.
there's certain parentage rumors about him and James Reed. Have you ever heard that?
I pass. No comment.
Yeah, I don't think that's true either. But anyway, he has been he is also the spokesperson for the sheriff's department. See how that works?
I haven't seen him lately. I was going to ask you about that. I thought I saw a couple other officers representing the sheriff's department.
So the telephone number for the State Bureau of Investigations is 334-676-6006. if you have any concerns or information, that is who you should contact. So Paul, while all this is going on and the officer involved hasn't been identified, they've run the victim into the ground. The Bay Minette Police Department is hosting a golf tournament at Holly Hills Golf Course, March 25th, 2023. Is this a good place to protest? I don't know, but
it'd be an excellent place for everybody to show up and protest for the lack of concern. And I can bet that's one of Mayor Wills's little ideas. Let's have a golf tournament and raise some money. Okay.
So the Holly Hills Country Club was in the toilet, and the city acquired it for its debt, and then pumped $1 million into it. Presumably, they redid the clubhouse and fixed all the irrigation and bought new carts and, redid the bar. And so this is a municipal property, so expect to have your civil rights shat upon. Registration's at 7, tee off at 8 o'clock. And then,
maybe we should get some balls with baseball bats and we could hit them across the range.
Just some air horns every time somebody comes back in their swing, hit that air horn. They won't have a good time playing out there. So Chief Al Talbert received recognition from the Alabama Association of Chiefs of Police, the State of Alabama Police Officer Standards and Training Commission, and the University Partnership for Continuing Education for completing 240 hours for a certificate of achievement. I just trolling their Facebook, man. Yeah, I mean, it's all good stuff. And then they're holding classes for run, hide, and fight for administrators, and that's presumably in the situation of a school and officer-involved shooting. So if you're interested in reading the letter and reading the article, you can go to fox10tv.com and check it out for yourself. We all kind of know what's going on around here, Brandon.
That's the problem. We don't know. It's possible Otis French did get violent with the officer, and the officer was in a dire way and pulls his handgun and has to save his life by shooting French. And it's possible, that the officer rousted French and got acted improperly, and this could have been resolved without it becoming the end of Mr. French. No one knows, other than of course Mr. French is dead, the officer and the people that have seen the body cam footage. So if Major Crimes has cleared the officer, whose name we still don't know for certain, then they're telling us it was a justifiable shooting, but they haven't done that yet. They've sent it to the Attorney General for review. Supposedly a grand jury is going to take a look at this at some point.
But at some point, this has to be released. And
at some point, they have to release, a verdict. This was a justifiable shooting, or it was not. But without releasing the body cam footage and I'm not asking for them to put, Otis French's last moments on the internet for all to see, but there's nobody outside of the Major Crimes Unit, the officer, and now supposedly the Attorney General's office, who are in a position to know what happened. Everything else is speculation. If you want to believe that, the police are great and that, they would never do anything that, is untoward and we back the blue 100%, you really have no evidence for that position any more than the people protesting the death have, because nothing's been shared with the media, much less the public.
Except
what we
for
do know is that he was stopped for a minor traffic violation. And what we do know that Mr. Reed verified was that there was some sort of altercation with the stun gun. And then Mr. French took off and the police officer went after him. All he had to do at that point in time was to call for backup, because he knew the officer knew who he was dealing with. But then he re-engaged with him again. All of that we do know is confirmed. That part we do know. But I am highly, highly, highly suspicious of any evidence that is going to come from Major Crimes, go to the district attorney, and be presented at a grand jury. Woo! Somebody else needs to look at that. I can tell you right now. They can make up and say anything they want, or they can tell 100% the truth, and nobody knows.
Well,
until much later.
Allow anytime there's an officer involved shooting, to hand over the investigation. Many times ABI the state is called in to investigate even a car accident where a police officer is involved. Baldwin County, they do things differently down there. And they, instead of calling in Montgomery and saying, I'm on Bureau of Investigation, this is your deal, we will cooperate in any way. Baldwin County handles their business in Baldwin County, and I'm told that's the way they want to do it. Now, if you have more confidence in your Baldwin County local officials, great. But if you don't, I can understand why certain persons might be suspicious of how this has been handled. But this, again, was pre-existing Baldwin County policy.
So look, if it were an easy call, the Major Crimes Unit would have said this is absolutely a justified officer-involved shooting.
Yeah,
because they hot potatoed it, I'm saying there's correct. More to it.
Yeah, that definitely raises suspicions. Because, if Curly Bill Brocious pulls his 6-shooter on Wyatt Earp, and Wyatt Earp has to dang gun him down, and you've got body cam footage of that, that's an easy call.
We just seen that.
And also,
later, this was a justified shooting.
Yeah, and I'd like to know, they very quick to speak about Mr. French's history. I want to hear the history of the police officer. I've heard that he worked at other agencies within Baldwin County. He was fired from that before he came to Bay Minette. And I can tell you firsthand my conversation with an FBI agent that said Alabama was the number one notorious for shuffling around police officers from one department to another. So I'd like to hear a little bit of those facts come up. We hadn't heard any of that either. But
again, Major Crimes Unit is controlling the investigation.
Correct.
And as anyone in journalism knows, the person who controls the investigation releases the facts that they want to release.
That's it.
To fit the narrative that they want advanced.
That's it.
So, Rob Hulbert this week, in his opinion piece, Damn the Torpedoes, what was he thinking? Right now, even Ethics Chief Tom Albritton has to have joined the rest of the state in wondering, what was he thinking when he gave money to his children from the scholarship trust that he sat on, Now,
what gets me about this, Brandon, is it is just inconceivable to me that the executive director of ethics is under all this pressure, 3 different lawsuits, got the AG on his ass and everything else, legislation session, and he's still at work. He's still got a job. I can't fathom what the the judges that are above him, Lynn Stewart, and them, what their titles?
it's set up where the governor is not over ethics. Of course, given the history of Alabama, one can see why it would be set up that way.
Yeah.
So you don't want the governor to be able to remove the ethics director on a whim. And the legislature, we gavelled in. The governor, had her state of the state and called a special session. So they're not even in regular session yet. Well, we have one day of the session, and now we're in special session to deal with the ARPA. So the legislature is not in a position to, have oversight hearings on Albritton. So it's all basically in the hands of the ethics commissioners. Albritton works for them.
Yeah.
They can call a special deal and say, hey, guy, we love you, but
bye,
or we need to suspend you and let Cynthia Ralston or someone handle the shop.
Oh my God!
We have an outside review of this case, and
we really want Miss Cynthia to go with Mr. Albritton. When he leaves, I hope Cynthia goes with him. My personal opinion.
Well, again, those decisions are up to the Ethics Commission.
Yeah.
But apparently they're willing to allow these lawsuits to continue, and they will make a judgment when they are resolved, however that happens or however long that takes. So basically there's a cloud over the Ethics Commission in the state. The Attorney General, has pretty openly expressed lack of confidence in Mr. Albritton and his handling of ethics in the state, and
right.
Not just on this issue. It's pretty much in the hands of the Ethics Commission, and I guess in the case of Marshall's lawsuit with the state courts now. How the state courts could be, because if somebody gets a verdict, they don't, resolution of that lawsuit they don't like, then of course they take it to the Court of Civil Appeals, and you can appeal the Court of Civil Appeals to the Alabama Supreme Court, and we could still be talking about this 3 years from now.
Oh yeah. I think maybe one of the civil suits may get a little bit ahead of the AG suit. We'll see.
You think so, huh?
I think so. I think the lawsuit that I favor the most is the one filed by Mr. Byron Matthews, where he's representing the kids themselves in Connecticut County that should have gotten the scholarships and had no knowledge. The Board of Education, nobody in Connecticut County even knew these scholarships were available. And here Mr. Albritton is the one handing them out. You would have think that he and Regions Bank would have gone to the high school and said, hey, look what we got. No, that wasn't the case. Everybody kept their mouths shut and stuffed their pockets full, evidently.
Well, Paul,
in a perfect world, you would like when you set up one of these kind of trusts, where the awards of like the scholarships are made by a committee that you select of like this principal or this retired teacher or this Boy Scout guy or whomever, and they make the scholarships rather than the trustees themselves, which I guess is the underlying flaw in the way this was set up, which I guess was set up with the Albritton law firm.
Yeah.
Yes,
it was. And what is going to be really revealing, if they don't quash it in some way or another beforehand, is in discovery when we find out all of the individuals that actually did get scholarships for their families, because I think it was in 2014, Regions Bank and the trustees changed the way that they were doing the reporting as to where you could not tell who actually got the scholarship. So this going to be very, very interesting. If I was Mr. Albritton, I would be I would be eating Rolaids all day long. Let's put it that way.
So everyone is aware that the House of Representatives is under Republican control.
Right.
Yeah, 77-28.
So, oh no! I mean the federal.
Oh, federal.
Federal. Yeah.
I've
And
got
so-
a state focus here.
Right.
So it's not quite like that up there yet. But the House Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government held a hearing on the Twitter files, and I can just tell you that these people were attacked. Their credibility called into question, and even demanding sources, which is something that anyone who's ever read the First Amendment should know you can't ask of a journalist, or if you've ever read any case law. So anyway, I thought we would outro with this, and I hope you guys stick around and listen to it. It's worth your time. We'll see you in a week.
Okay.
Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Plaskett, members of the Select Committee, thank you for having me today. My name is Matt Taibbi. I've been a reporter for 30 years and a staunch advocate of the First Amendment. Much of that time was spent at Rolling Stone magazine. Ranking Member Plaskett, I'm not a so-called journalist. I've won the National Magazine Award, the I.F. Stone Award for Independent Journalism, and I've written 10 books, including 4 New York Times bestsellers. I'm now the editor of the online magazine Racket on the independent platform Substack. I'm here today because of a series of events that began late last year when I received a note from a source online. It read, "Are you interested in doing a deep dive into what censorship and manipulation was going on at Twitter?" A week later, the first of what became known as the Twitter Files reports came out. To say these attracted intense public interest would be an understatement. My computer looked like a Vegas slot machine as just the first tweet about the blockage of the Hunter Biden laptop story registered 143 million impressions and 30 million engagements. But it wasn't until a week after the first report, after Michael Schellenberger, Barry Weiss, and other researchers joined the search of the files, that we started to grasp the significance of this story. The original promise of the internet was that it might democratize the exchange of information globally. A free internet would overwhelm all attempts to control information flow, its very existence a threat to anti-democratic forms of government everywhere. What we found in the files was a sweeping effort to reverse that promise and use machine learning and other tools to turn the internet into an instrument of censorship and social control. Unfortunately, our own government appears to be playing a lead role. We saw the first hints in communications between Twitter executives before the 2020 election, when we read things like "flagged by DHS" or "please see attached report from FBI for potential misinformation." This would be attached to an Excel spreadsheet with a long list of names whose accounts were often suspended shortly after. Again, Ranking Member Plaskett, I would note that the evidence of Twitter-government relationship includes lists of tens of thousands of names on both the left and right. The people affected include Trump supporters, but also left-leaning sites like Consortium and Truthout, the leftist South American channel Telesur, the Yellow Vest movement. That, in fact, is a key point of the Twitter files, that it's neither a left nor right issue. Following the trail of communications between Twitter and the federal government across tens of thousands of emails led to a series of revelations. Mr. Chairman, we summarized and submitted them to the committee in the form of a new Twitter Files thread, which was also released to the public this morning. We learned Twitter, Facebook, Google, and other companies developed a formal system for taking in moderation requests from every corner of government, from the FBI, the DHS, the HHS, DOD, the Global Engagement Center at State, even the CIA. For every government agency scanning Twitter, there were perhaps 20 quasi-private entities doing the same thing, including Stanford's Election Integrity Partnership, NewsGuard, the Global Disinformation Index, and many others, many taxpayer-funded. A focus of this fast-growing network, as Mike noted, is making lists of people whose opinions, beliefs, associations, or sympathies are deemed misinformation, disinformation, or malinformation. That last term is just a euphemism for true but inconvenient. Undeniably, the making of such lists is a form of digital McCarthyism. Ordinary Americans are not just being reported to Twitter for de-amplification or deplatforming, but to firms like PayPal, digital advertisers like Xandr, and crowdfunding sites like GoFundMe. These companies can and do refuse service to law-abiding people and businesses whose only crime is falling afoul of a distant, faceless, unaccountable, algorithmic judge. As someone who grew up a traditional ACLU liberal, this mechanism for punishment and deprivation without due process is horrifying. Another troubling aspect is the role of the press, which should be the people's last line of defense in such cases. But instead of investigating these groups, journalists partnered with them. If Twitter declined to remove an account right away, government agencies and NGOs would call reporters for the New York Times, Washington Post, and other outlets, who in turn would call Twitter demanding to know why action had not yet been taken. Effectively, news media became an arm of a state-sponsored thought policing system. I'm running out of time, so I'll just sum up and say it's just not possible to instantly arrive at truth. It is, however, possible, becoming technologically possible to instantly define and enforce a political consensus online, which I believe is what we're looking at. This is a grave threat to people of all political persuasions. The First Amendment and an American population accustomed to the right to speak is the best defense left against the censorship industrial complex. If the latter can knock over our first and most important constitutional guarantee, these groups will have no serious opponent left anywhere. If there's anything the Twitter files show, it's that we're in danger of losing this most precious right, without which all democratic rights are impossible. Thank you for the opportunity to appear, and I'd be happy to answer any questions from the committee.
Well,
I've been reading him forever.
So
I've had my own experience with Twitter. In my 14 years of journalism, I have been involved in 3 startups, 2 of which are still in business. And that last one was still in business, 1819 News. They cranked up in the middle of October, I want to say, of 2021. And one of my stories was covering the gubernatorial race. I don't know if y'all remember him or not, but there's a pastor in Opelika, Dean Odle.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dean believes in flat earth and
Right.
That the vaccine doesn't work and it's a conspiracy, but COVID's, was very anti the NIH CDC narrative on COVID. I wrote a bunch of stories for the launch of 1819, and one of them was covering the healthcare freedom rally down in Montgomery, where Dean Odle was one of the speakers. And I did an article on Odle, and I knew what Odle was saying about the COVID-19 vaccine was hyper controversial. So I didn't just say, hey, the governor of Alabama candidate says, I took his quotes, which I had taped to make sure I quoted him exactly. And then I went to the CDC website and I quoted Dr. Fauci and the NIH and the CDC and the Alabama Department of Public Health. And so everything that Odle said, I put the mainstream media, mainstream government narrative behind it in the next paragraph, so that, anybody who reads the entire article would see that we were just presenting 2 points of view, and a bunch of that CDC narrative that we've since found out was not accurate. But, it's just, I'm covering the debate. This is what Odle says. This is what Real Scientist says. I even put a disclaimer down at the bottom saying that Dean Odle is not a doctor, is not a scientist, and does not have a medical degree to have a qualified opinion on COVID-19. The bots at Twitter did not care how I did it. They saw that one article, and because of that one article, they shut down all of 1819 News for 8 days. Every single article we did as a new startup was blocked from being seen by Twitter people. It made, of course, my editors angry with me because I created this mess. And the follow-up article, which was what, the other 6 speakers at the Healthcare Freedom Act, that got suppressed by the editors. What Twitter was doing, and what we now know they were doing on behalf of their government masters at NIH, was censoring the debate online. And, of course, they don't have like a person to read this. They have a bot, and bot's looking for, a string of words that doesn't meet the narrative. And because there were strings of words that were highly inflammatory in what Mr. Odle said, they not only suppressed Mr. Odle, they suppressed me, the journalist covering Odle, and they had my entire outlet. I mean, people lost jobs at 1819, perhaps because of, our failed startup, which was partially I'm responsible for, or the censors at NIH and Twitter are responsible for, more correctly.
So Paul,
what a mess.
So Brandon, welcome to your second censorship project, because if you go back and check out Backstory Podcast number 74 that we called KFAB Alabama, we talk about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, one and done. We talk about, Paul doesn't like it when I classroom, but we talked about mRNA vaccines. And guess what YouTube did to us?
Shut it down.
That's right. And they muted. So the only way we could get it back up was if they muted the part where we talked about vaccines. If we would agree to that, we could have our channel back. That's Google, not Twitter. Yeah. Twitter's a look under the hood, a peek under the hood. But
we know that
Twitter's this big, Google's that big.
Yeah, I know. But we know that Twitter was coordinating with the FBI, the National Security Agency, the National Institute of Health. We know that for a fact because Elon Musk bought Twitter afterwards and released the facts that they were coordinating before he got there.
To this guy, Matt Taibbi. And that's
how much you want to bet that Twitter is not the only one who was coordinating with NSC, FBI, and NIH, and other government entities. I mean, I don't want to cast aspersion on YouTube or Facebook, but I don't think Twitter had a closer relationship necessarily than anybody else did. I mean, how much of what we're hearing is going to government censors using private corporations as agents of the government?
But
taking direct orders from the government.
Okay, but look at their corporate governance structure. That's another thing to keep in mind about this. It looks like the career path is the ABC organizations, right? You go to work at wherever, and then after 10 years, you go get a job at Twitter or Google or in their compliance department or something to that nature. So you have people actively still working at these alphabet soup organizations, and they have friends. Their former coworkers, sending them requests to take things down or to shadow ban.
We all know that, like somebody gets out of college with a law degree, they go work for the district attorney's office or the AG's office or the public defender's office, knowing that they serve their time there, they become more valuable hopefully, to the top law firms.
Right.
So the top law firms have members who used to be, with public defenders' offices, or more commonly district attorneys and attorney general's offices. So that sort of collegiality has been the American experience for generations. What we're seeing here with what Twitter was doing, however, is systematic control by the government. Because, Twitter obviously does not want the federal government making their life more difficult. So it's like, hey, we will invite your agents of this government to come into our company and tell us what kind of speech can we say and what we cannot say. Do you know how dangerous I could be with that kind of power?
It's kind of like nuclear weapons. It's like, okay, and then who's going to make the decision about whether we use them or not, right? It is as dangerous, and the idiots wielding it are accountable to no one.
Yeah, but we've had nuclear weapons for a long time, and everybody likes to huff and bluff, and to this point, thankfully, other than Hiroshima and Nagasaki, nobody's actually pulled the trigger. What was happening here is, not only was the government involved with these companies, they were pulling the trigger on millions of Americans and people outside the country every day. Like Brandon at 1819 News is like, hey, 1819 News and Brandon, you have said things you cannot say in this country. And again, Brennan in 1819 didn't say it. It was a candidate for governor of Alabama. And, we were forced to suppress that candidate, whom I did not vote for, campaign, because the things he was saying in his normal stump speech was not approved speech. And Dean Odle had no chance of being governor. I mean, he was not a threat to them.
Well,
but
Brandon,
just because the speech,
I hate to tell you, but it only took 4 episodes for you to become a gonzo journalist and become part of the conversation.
I'm not a gonzo guy.
I know you're not.
Why? This is what happened, who did it, where it was, and when it was.
There you go. There you go. Well, we lost Mr. Rip, but we will see everybody back next Friday. And have fun up there in Montgomery, man.
Okay. See you next week.